The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical Psychology for Today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, voiced by David Alt. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we present excerpts from Thinkers of the East by Idries Shah. This audio has been made available by the Idries Shah Foundation. The necessity for the teaching. Maruf, son of Zayd, was asked, "Why is the teaching not offered to the people of so many countries where, through their material advancement, the people could help the progress of the work?" He said, "Where a people have no capacity, and where the activity has no teachers, there is no advantage in material or other advancement. One can make no swords where there is no iron." One day you will recall from the Munaqib, Mu'inuddin requested Maulana Rumi to give his son special mystical training by projection. Rumi answered, "The load which 40 men pull cannot be sustained by one." The mystical force can be perceived by men and not by a man alone. Where there is no quantity, there can be no sharing. If you had a camel load of halwa, you would need the exact number of boxes to put it in before you discharged your load. The questioner was not pleased with this answer, and he said, "The sage has failed to note that we are not merchants of halwa." The sage, however, said gently, "If you were, you would understand what I mean." Observing one's own opinions. "For months," recalled the sage Hakim Masum, "I was made by my master, Khwaja Alam Shah, to write letters to his dictation and to keep notes of what he said and thought. When I saw him writing, I could see that he wrote faster and much more beautifully than I. Many of the things which I wrote were so badly done that there was difficulty in reading them. One day he said, 'I have been trying to give you the exercise you needed. If you improve your speed and calligraphy, so much the better. If you think I am too illiterate or lazy to do my own work, you have a chance immediately afterwards of observing your own opinions, and seeing that they are opinions. And seeing that opinions, if they are just the ones that suit you, distort your senses." Great worth. A man came to Idries Shah and said, "First I followed this teacher, and then that one. Next I studied these books, and then those. I feel, although I know nothing of you and your teachings, this experience has been slowly preparing for me to learn from you." The Shah answered, "Nothing you have learnt in the past will help you here. If you are to stay with us, you will have to abandon all pride in the past. That is a form of self-congratulation." The man exclaimed, "This is to me the proof that you are the great, the real, and the true teacher, for none whom I have met in the past had dared to deny the value of what I had studied before." Bahudin said, "This feeling is in itself unworthy. In accepting me so enthusiastically and without understanding, you are flattering yourself that you have perceptions which are in fact lacking in you. You are still, in effect, saying, 'I am of some worth, because I have recognized Bahudin as a great man.'" Analogy. A certain important man of learning said to a Sufi, "Why do you Sufis always use analogies? Such forms are good enough for the ignorant, but you can speak clearly to people of sense." The Sufi said, "Experience shows, alas, that it is not a matter of the ignorant and the wise. It is a matter that those who are most in need of a certain understanding, or even a certain part of understanding, are always the least able to accept it without an analogy. Tell them directly, and they will prevent themselves perceiving its truth. Lucky people. Ishan Turki sent a disciple on a long journey, quite alone. His instructions were to seek out people who regarded themselves as lucky, and only to spend time with them, to stay with them, to eat with them, to support himself by working for them. When he was asked why he did this, the master said, "All people who regard themselves as lucky have the kind of calmness that I wish to expose my disciple to. The best way to enable him to find the kind of people was to describe the main characteristic which such a person would have. If I had asked him to find people with calm, he would not have known how to do it." A questioner asked, "But what if he had met a genuinely lucky man, who knew he was lucky, and not one who just imagined it because he was calm and optimistic?" The Ishan said, "Such a man would have been a teacher and a sage. He would have known how to deal with my disciple to further his progress, and thus he would have worked to the advantage of all of us." Value for money. Awad Afifi had a book in which he had written the accounts of conversations with sages and philosophers during 20 years of travels and studies. One day a scholar called to see him and asked if he could make a copy of the book. "Yes," said Awad, "you may certainly do so. I will charge you, however, 1,000 gold pieces for the service." "That is a tremendous sum to pay for something that you have here, which I am not even going to deplete by copying," said the scholar. "And besides, it is unworthy to charge for knowledge." "I make no charge for knowledge itself," said Awad, "for knowledge is not in books, only some of the ways to gain it. As for the 1,000 gold pieces, I intend to spend them on the travel expenses of pupils who cannot afford to travel. And as for the greatness of the sum, I have spent 50,000 on my travels, plus 20 years of my life. Perhaps you might care to let me know what that amounts to." The man who gave more and less. Inqilabi said, "I went to many a respected master, each strongly revered by his following, each revered by me. Then I found a different one. He told me so many things I never imagined that I saw him as generous beyond all others. But when, through his aid, I arrived at full knowledge of the secret, I realized that it was all the others who had been much more generous. They had told me all they knew, but it had been useful in appearance and not in reality. Generosity without substance is nobility, not sustenance. Why did he not give me yet more of what he had? I would have charged him with this parsimony, but yet I could not have, for it was only at the end that I realized that, as with a child, though instructing me little compared to what there was, he had guided me aright. He had given me what was needful, not what was remarkable." When even kings are weak. Shah Feroz, who is remembered as the teacher of many very distinguished Sufis, was often asked during his lifetime why he did not teach them faster. He said, "Because even the most dedicated will, until a certain point of understanding, may not be teachable at all. He is here in the flesh, but absent in every other way." He also recited this tale. There was once a king who wanted to become a Sufi. The Sufi whom he approached about the matter said, "Majesty, you cannot study with the elect until you can overcome heedlessness." "Heedlessness," said the king. "Am I not heedful of my religious obligations? Do I not look after the people? Whom can you find in all my realm who has a complaint against me on the grounds of heedlessness?" "That is precisely the difficulty," said the Sufi. "Because heedfulness is so marked in some things, people imagine that it must be a part of their texture." "I cannot understand that sort of remark," said the king, "and perhaps you will regard me as unsuitable because I cannot fathom your riddles." "Not at all," said the Sufi, "but a would-be disciple cannot really have a debate with his prospective teacher. Sufis deal in knowledge, not argument. But I will give you a demonstration of your heedlessness, if you will carry out a test and do what I ask in respect to it." The king agreed to take the test, and the Sufi told him to say, "I believe you," to everything which should be said to him in the ensuing few minutes. "If that is a test, it is easy enough to start becoming a Sufi," said the king. Now the Sufi started the test. He said, "I am a man from beyond the skies." "I believe you," said the king. The Sufi continued, "Ordinary people try to gain knowledge. Sufis have so much that they try not to use it." "I believe you," said the king. Then the Sufi said, "I am a liar." "I believe you," said the king. The Sufi went on, "I was present when you were born." "I believe you," said the king. "And your father was a peasant," said the Sufi. "That is a lie," shouted the king. The Sufi looked at him sorrowfully and said, "Since you are so heedless that you cannot for 1 minute remember to say, 'I believe you,' without some prejudice coming into play, no Sufi would be able to teach you anything." Conversion. Khwaja Ahra's reputation had grown so great that many people flocked to enroll themselves as his supporters, whether he wanted them or not. One day he heard that 4 particularly obnoxious individuals were on their way to see him, determined to be able to say that they had become followers of the Lord of the Free. He immediately made inquiries about these people's likes and dislikes. When they arrived, they found that he was wearing a red cap, talking immoderately, eating sweetmeats, and claiming that he was unable to resist opium. They spent less than half an hour in his presence and never spoke about him again. This podcast is copyright 2016, the Idries Shah Foundation.